Alright, before we dive in, let's really get honest about Liam Neeson for a minute. When you hear his name, what pops into your head? Is it that gravelly, almost poetic voice? That jawline you could probably cut glass with? Or maybe, like most of us, you picture that one phone call in Taken, the scene that had every villain this side of the equator reconsidering their career choices. That's where my mind goes too. Except, there's this thing people miss. You actually don't know Liam Neeson at all. Not really. Because the real story, it's not the typical Hollywood tale, not a shiny from the outset kind of deal. It's rawer, tougher, and honestly, a lot more beautiful than anything you've seen him do on camera. So, get comfortable, grab your coffee. This isn't a hero's journey, it's the story of a kid who grew up feeling like he was always standing on the wrong side of every fence, and somehow he became one of the quiet legends walking among us. Let's go back. I mean really back, to June 7th, 1952. Ballymena, Northern Ireland. The word small doesn't quite capture the place. Don't think scenic hills or charming pubs. Imagine grit, rough winters, and a silence so tense it's more about making it through than anything peaceful. In Ballymena, Protestants made up most of the population, and the Neesons were Catholic. So from day one, little William John Neeson was on the margins. Not because of anything he did, but because the world put him there. Liam's dad, Bernard, was a school caretaker. He didn't talk much. He showed his love by turning up and doing his job every single day without fuss. Kitty, his mother, was a school cook. She was warm, fiercely faithful. A kind of faith that ran underneath everything, not just for Sundays, but in every meal she made, every word she said. The Neesons had 4 kids jammed into a modest terrace house, counting every penny, living by rules laid out in plain language. Work hard, stay humble. But trouble, as anyone who's ever actually tried to avoid it knows, never waits for permission. As a Catholic kid in Ballymena during the 50s and 60s, Liam learned early that nothing was ever really safe. The Troubles, everything you've heard about that era of Irish history, hadn't erupted yet, but the strain was everywhere. People could feel it in the streets, in which doors you knocked on, which side of the street you avoided in the dark. Liam barely understood life, and still he got the message. Belonging wasn't guaranteed. People made judgments long before you ever said a word. Now add to that, he was huge. By his teenage years, he towered over his friends, awkwardly folded into chairs, bumping through doorways, a bundle of angles and nervous energy. He had a body that seemed ready for a future he hadn't caught up to yet. Anyone who's raised a teenager knows the chaos I'm talking about. But that size pointed him somewhere. At 9 years old, he wandered into the Emerald Amateur Boxing Club, and for the first time, something clicked. Not with violence or anger, but with discipline. Not the kind someone else forces on you, but the kind you grab for yourself. Turns out controlling your fists and your fear are really the same lesson. He stuck with it, trained hard. In the ring, being big wasn't a curse. It was an advantage. It was his. School, though, was a different beast. The setup back then didn't fit boys like Liam. He was intuitive, restless, tuned more to stories than statistics. Not bad at school, just overlooked. He wasn't failing. He just wasn't noticed. And if you've ever felt invisible like that, or watched your kid slip through the cracks, you know how rough it is. Not dumb, just unseen. Then, almost by accident, everything shifted. Liam was 11. A drama teacher, Mr. McCloskey, needed extra bodies on stage for some school production. It wasn't about talent, just filling spots. Liam got handed a role pretty much at random, and when he walked onto that stage, well, everything shifted. Here's this kid who spent his whole life shrinking himself, trying to blend in, and suddenly, the stage wanted more. It pulled him outward, gave him permission to expand, to fill a room rather than tiptoe through it. Instead of just reciting lines, he started diving into other people's skin. For a kid who'd always had to be careful, always second-guessing what line to cross or not, the freedom to lose himself in someone else wasn't just acting, it was a kind of revelation. That moment, honestly, was the real beginning. Not some wild Hollywood dream, just a boy finding a place to be fully himself, somewhere he could finally stop worrying about which side of the line he stood on. And if you look at Neeson now, his presence, his voice, his stories on screen, somewhere deep inside, you're still watching the kid from Ballymena, learning how to belong. Liam Neeson kept acting through his teenage years. He did not have any plans or dreams. It was something he did. Like some people like music or prayer, he did it because it felt right. At 17, he left school, got a job as a forklift operator at a Guinness brewery in Belfast. It was work, the kind of work his father would have liked. He drove that machine for hours, had lunch with men twice his age, and went home to a city that was getting more and more violent. There were bombings and shootings and roadblocks. It was like background noise to him and his friends. He tried to be a teacher. He went to St. Mary's College. He only lasted 2 years. Something was pulling him to do something. So he applied to the Lyric Theatre in Belfast. They said yes. That is where Liam Neeson started to become the person he really was. The directors noticed something about him right away. He was not trying to show off. He did not try to get the audience to look at him. He just stood still. When he did something big happened. The audience leaned in to hear what he had to say. It was like they knew he was going to say something. Liam Neeson was not just being quiet, he was waiting for the moment to act. It was like a boxer waiting for the moment to punch. It was amazing to watch. In 1978 he moved to Dublin. He started acting at the Abbey Theatre. It is a deal for Irish actors to act there. He acted in all sorts of plays. He learned how to be real and honest in his acting. He did not try to make people cry or feel sad. He just acted like it was real. Hollywood started to notice him. At first it was slow, then they started to pay more attention. He acted in some movies like Excalibur and The Bounty, with Mel Gibson and Anthony Hopkins. He was still not a big star. Liam Neeson spent a time waiting for people to notice him. He was respected by actors and directors. The audience did not know his name yet. Other actors would watch him. Say, watch him. Nobody was saying it loud enough for everyone to hear. Then, in 1987, he acted in a play on Broadway called Anna Christie. That is where he met a woman named Natasha Richardson. I want you to really listen to this part of the story, because it is where everything changes. Natasha Richardson was the daughter of an actress named Vanessa Redgrave. She grew up in the theater. She knew about acting and plays. She was not pretentious. She was a funny person. She could talk about things and then laugh about something silly. She made every room a place just by being in it. For Liam Neeson, Natasha was the person who really saw him. She did not just see the actor. She saw the real person underneath, the boy from Ballymena who was still inside him. She loved him for who he was, not just for his acting. In the early 90s, Steven Spielberg set out to make the most urgent film of his career, Schindler's List. The story centers on Oskar Schindler, a German businessman and Nazi Party member who during the Holocaust managed to save over 1,000 Jewish lives by employing them in his factories. When Spielberg started thinking about who could play Schindler, he toyed with options like Kevin Costner, Mel Gibson, and Warren Beatty. They made sense commercially, sure, but something was missing. Schindler demanded a different kind of presence, a man who carried complexity without showing it off, whose kindness just happened quietly, almost by accident, and not because he announced himself as a hero. Spielberg found what he needed in Liam Neeson. Filming Schindler's List in Poland in 1993 meant confronting history head-on. They shot in black and white, at real locations haunted by real atrocities. The actors weren't shielded from the truth. There wasn't any distance or comfort between them and the weight of where they stood. For Neeson, it turned out to be the most challenging and draining experience of his life. When it came time to shoot that final scene, Schindler in front of the workers, overcome with the realization that he could have saved more lives, regretting that even his car could have meant 10 more people saved, it took days to get right. Neeson admitted he couldn't think his way into the moment. He had to find the feeling deep inside, somewhere past words and rational thought. The guilt was heavy, palpable. When Neeson cried, it was real. Everyone on set knew those tears weren't just acting. When Schindler's List landed in December 1993, something shifted for Neeson. He'd spent years as the underrated unseen man, but now the world couldn't ignore him. By 1994, Neeson's life had transformed. He married Natasha Richardson, the woman meant for him, after the film propelled his name into the global spotlight. He'd climbed higher than he'd ever dreamed, professionally and personally. For someone raised on the edges of everything, you can imagine it felt, at least for a while, like he'd finally arrived. They built a world together that valued normalcy, something rare in their circles, almost fiercely. 2 sons followed, Mikhail, born in 1995, and Daniel in 1996. They split their days between New York and Ireland, carving out a quiet, gentle happiness that people who knew them described as genuine. It was an intentional life, built to savor what they had. Then, March 18, 2009, Natasha Richardson went for a beginner's ski lesson in Quebec. She wasn't a skilled skier. The hill was mild, nothing extraordinary about the day. During the lesson, she fell. It looked trivial. She got up, brushed it off, declined medical help twice. She even called friends from her hotel later, laughing about the tumble, sounding totally fine. But 2 hours later, everything changed. She complained of a headache, sudden, severe. At the hospital, the situation was already dire. The fall caused bleeding between her skull and brain. The 2 hours between her fall and the first signs of trouble passed, and with them, the chance to reverse what had happened. Natasha was flown to Lenox Hill Hospital in New York. Liam raced through the night to get to her. When he arrived, doctors told him the scan said it all. The damage to Natasha's brain was devastating. She wouldn't come back. He faced a choice no one should ever have to make. On March 18th, 2 days after the accident, Richardson was taken off life support. She was just 45. What followed for Neeson can hardly be described. He lost his partner, but more than that, he lost the person who was the center of his private life for 15 years. Friends said he looked emptied out, present in body but lost everywhere else. He kept up the routines for his sons, trying to hold together some version of normal for them, driving them to school, being there, keeping up responsibilities. All the while, he carried grief that bent him beneath its weight. Later, Neeson spoke openly about it, more candidly than most. He called grief a physical force, a pressure in the chest that never goes away. He talked about moments when a stranger's coat would look just like Natasha's, and he'd be unable to breathe. Ordinary objects became ambushes: a coffee cup, an open book, a song overheard in a restaurant. Any of them could flatten him on the spot. Neeson's experience was raw, intimate, and heartbreakingly honest. You can feel in those details the staggering force of loss, how it rewrites a life. And yet, somehow, he kept carrying on, holding to the fragments of a world that once felt full. He kept working, not because work felt safe, or because he liked it. Honestly, he just couldn't stand being still. Sitting in silence was agony. And his sons, yeah, they needed a dad who showed up. Standing, showing strength, even when he felt empty inside. The camera became a sort of sanctuary. It was the only spot where he could redirect all that grief, where it had somewhere real to land. Back in 2008, just before Natasha died, a movie came out that nobody saw coming. Taken. No fancy script, no Oscar dreams, just a straightforward story. A father, a missing daughter, a phone call. And then those lines everybody knows by heart. Liam Neeson, 55, didn't get shuffled into the mentor or aging patriarch roles like so many before him. Instead, he ended up as an action star. But it wasn't about youth or muscles. It was all weight, all voice. One glance at him, one word, and you understood. This guy could really tear the world apart for someone he loves. Taken blew up. It made over $200 million on a tiny budget. Studios started looking at Neeson in a whole new way. Critics rolled their eyes at the next wave of action movies, but honestly, they missed the point. People flocked to see him not because he looked tough, but because there was real pain inside those threats. There was loss. Every time he growls a promise of vengeance, you feel he's been through worse. You trust him because he's survived hell already. Then came The Gray. Here, Neeson played a man trapped in the icy wilds, hunted by wolves, losing friends one by one, wrestling with his urge to just let go. The movie opened on a voiceover letter to his absent wife. It hurt to hear. It felt raw, more confession than acting. Viewers felt it instantly. This was personal. He never spelled it out, never explained how much of himself was in it. He didn't have to. The pain was in the performance. His sons became the reason he kept going. He's talked about it openly. Being a father meant he couldn't give up or disappear. He had to stick around, even when every part of him wanted to retreat. Michael, honoring his mom's name, started acting too. Neeson talks about watching his son with pride and something deeper, almost bittersweet, maybe because he recognizes Natasha in those performances. Daniel chose a quieter life, away from the spotlight. Neeson loves them equally fiercely. When asked about his greatest achievement, he's clear. It's his sons, not the movies, not the awards. After Natasha died, he shifted gears. He became a voice for ski safety, pushing for helmet awareness. Not loud campaigns, just steady, determined action. He wanted to close the gap that cost him so much, a 2-hour delay that shouldn't have happened. Not for glory, not for show, but so nobody else would lose a loved one in silence. People who knew Natasha say she would have laughed at the action movies. Not mocking, more like she understood the irony and loved him enough to tease him about it. She'd be proud of the boys, and Liam knows this. Those thoughts help and hurt him, sometimes at the same time. Now, at 72, Neeson wears his age openly. His hair's silver, and he's still a big presence, but he moves careful, like every step is a choice. He works steadily, only picking projects that matter to him. He's looking back toward theater, toward stories that pull people in close, not just thrill rides. He pours energy into piecework in Northern Ireland and supports arts education wherever he can, because one drama teacher changed his life. And he wants that for the next kid who feels out of place. Strip away the fame, the roles, the heartbreak, and what's really left? A kid from the wrong side of town who kept showing up, who worked, loved, and lost. Then loved again, even when it hurt. Who spoke up, even when it cost him comfort. Who grieved, right out in the open, in a world where most people pretend to be strong and hide when they break. He's stumbled, made mistakes, got angry when it helped nothing. He's tripped in public and fallen in private, like we all do, like anyone whose inner life is just too big to fit behind their face. But he has endured, with dignity, with humor, with the stubborn and undecorated commitment to being present for the people who needed him most. Liam Neeson did not become who he is because the world handed him a stage and told him he was destined for it. He became who he is because he kept showing up to stages that offered no such promise, in a town that had given him no particular reason for hope, with a talent nobody had yet told him was extraordinary, and he kept going, quietly, stubbornly, faithfully, until the world had absolutely no choice but to look. That is not a Hollywood story. That is a human one. And if you've ever felt unseen, or started over, or kept going through grief that felt like it might actually end you, then maybe in some small and real way, it's your story too.